My name is Catherine Ellsworth. I am 58 years old, and for 3 years my daughter's husband has been telling people that I am unstable, that I am overbearing, that I suffocate my daughter with guilt, and that my presence at family events creates a tension no reasonable person should have to manage. That version of events has been repeated at dinner tables I was not invited to, in conversations with my daughter's friends I have never met, in whispered asides at holiday gatherings where my chair sat conspicuously empty, and in at least one email to my daughter's therapist that I was never meant to see. I am here to correct the record, permanently. The specific claim, the one I heard repeated back to me by my own sister last March, word for word, as though she were reading from a prepared statement, was this: Catherine made a scene at the hospital when Lily was born. She refused to leave when asked. Marcus had to physically walk her to the elevator. She hasn't been stable since David died. I was standing in my kitchen when my sister said those words. It was 7:12 on a Wednesday morning, and I was holding a ceramic mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier because I had been listening without interrupting, my back against the counter edge, my bare feet on tile that still held the night's cold. The mug had a chip on the rim, a small triangular absence where the glaze had flaked away years ago, exposing the raw clay beneath. I pressed my thumb into that chip while she spoke. I pressed until the edge cut into the pad of my thumb, until I felt the faint, warm slip of blood meeting ceramic. I did not move. I did not correct her. Something behind my eyes went perfectly flat, like a monitor switching from standby to active, and a part of my mind that I use professionally every single day began running a sequence I had not consciously initiated. I was already cataloging, already time-stamping, already noting which details in her account were structurally impossible. I am a medical records compliance auditor. I have spent 23 years reviewing hospital documentation for accuracy, completeness, and legal defensibility. My hands smell like toner and recycled paper 5 days a week. I can identify a falsified entry by its formatting before I read its content. The kerning shifts when someone pastes text from a different document template. The line spacing tells me which software version generated it, and the date stamp format reveals whether an entry was made in real time or added retrospectively. I know what an altered timestamp looks like. I know what a backdated addendum smells like. Figuratively, and sometimes literally, when the paper stock from the original chart doesn't match the stock of the inserted page. I know which fields auto-populate in hospital systems and which require manual override, and I know exactly what it means when a manual override appears in a record that should have been routine. I know the difference between a charting error and a deliberate omission, and I have testified to that difference under oath 11 times. That skill had protected hospitals from seven-figure liability claims for over 2 decades. It was about to dismantle my son-in-law's constructed narrative, using nothing but the documentation he never imagined anyone would request. Before I show you the evidence that makes this version of events impossible, tell me, where are you watching from? Because the version of this story that's been circulating has probably already reached you in some form. People like Marcus don't build their narratives in one direction. They build them outward, like concentric circles, until everyone in the radius has absorbed the contamination without knowing its source. I want you to have the real version, the documented one, the one with timestamps. The lie was constructed to serve a single purpose, to explain why I was no longer present in my daughter's life without implicating the person who removed me from it. If Catherine is unstable, if Catherine made a scene, if Catherine cannot be trusted around the baby, then Marcus isn't isolating his wife from her mother. He is protecting his family from a difficult woman who cannot regulate her own grief. The framing is elegant in its economy. It requires no villain with a visible motive. It requires only a concerned husband, overwhelmed, doing his best with a complicated situation he inherited when he married into a family still reeling from loss. Everyone nods. Everyone understands. No one calls Catherine to ask if any of it is true. My husband David died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. The timeline was so compressed that I was still organizing his medication schedule when the hospice nurse told me we were measuring hours, not days. Elena was 26 when her father died. She and Marcus had been dating for 8 months, long enough to have met David twice, briefly, before the diagnosis made social visits impossible. Marcus was present for the funeral. He stood beside Elena in the receiving line and shook hands with people whose names he did not know. He held her hand during the eulogy I could not finish reading, when my throat closed around the word generous, and I had to step away from the microphone. He drove her to my house every Sunday for the first year after, and sat quietly in the living room, while Elena and I looked at photographs spread across the dining table, and cried into casserole dishes brought by neighbors who gradually stopped coming by October. I said so explicitly, multiple times. At Thanksgiving that first year, I raised my glass and said that having him in Elena's life during the worst period of ours was a gift I could not adequately repay. He smiled modestly. He squeezed Elena's shoulder. He said, "Family shows up. That's all." I believed he was the kind of man who meant that. The first shift happened when Elena was pregnant with Lily. Imperceptible if you weren't trained to notice pattern deviations. And I wasn't looking for them, not yet. Sunday visits became bi-weekly, then monthly, then replaced by phone calls that grew shorter. Then, "Mom, Marcus thinks it's better if we rest this weekend. The drive takes a lot out of me." Then, "Marcus says we need to keep the house quiet before the baby comes. Just immediate family for now." I adjusted. I deferred. I told myself that a protective husband and a tired pregnant woman were not a pattern. They were a season. I would be patient. I would not be the mother-in-law who could not respect reasonable limits. The snorts landed on me unexpectedly one evening in November, 2 years into the slow erasure. I was reviewing a medical record at my kitchen table, a case where a hospital administrator had been adding notes to patient charts months after discharge, crafting a documentation trail that would support a narrative convenient to the institution. And I stopped. My pen hovered over the page, because I recognized the technique. Not from professional literature, from my own weekly phone calls with Elena, calls where she repeated, word for word, explanations that sounded rehearsed, that arrived fully formed, that addressed objections I had not yet raised. I had spent 23 years identifying retroactive narrative construction in institutional records. I was living inside one, and I had been filing each irregularity under reasonable, because I wanted it to be reasonable, because the alternative was unthinkable. The irony almost made me laugh, almost. What it actually did was make me set the pen down and sit in silence for a very long time. After Lily was born, July 14th, 3 years ago, I was present at the hospital. I arrived at 4:47 in the afternoon, 40 minutes after Elena called me herself from her recovery room, her voice still thick with exhaustion and joy. "Mom, come meet her. She's perfect." I drove to St. Francis Memorial in 22 minutes. I parked on the 3rd level of the garage, space 3 to 47. I signed the visitor log at 4:47 p.m. I remember the coincidence of the numbers, parking space, and timestamp matching. I held my granddaughter for the first time in a room that smelled of antiseptic and the particular sweetness of a newborn's scalp. I stayed for approximately 2 hours. Elena's eyes were closing. I kissed her forehead, told her I loved her, and left at approximately 6:38 p.m. Marcus walked me to the elevator. We spoke about parking validation. He told me to get my ticket stamped at the front desk. I thanked him. I drove home. That is what happened. Every second of it. That is not what has been told. What has been told, to my sister, to Elena's friends, to Marcus's parents, and to Dr. Kessler, is that I refused to leave, that I became emotional to the point of clinical disruption, that I made statements to Elena about David not being present to meet his grandchild that caused Elena to cry uncontrollably during a vulnerable postpartum moment, that nursing staff had to be involved in managing the situation, that Marcus had to physically guide me to the elevator while I protested, that this event confirmed a pattern of emotional instability that had been escalating since David's death. Every element of that account is fabricated, and I can prove it because I know how hospital documentation works the way other people know how to drive. I spent 3 weeks after hearing my sister's account building what I'm about to show you. Before I show you how far back this goes, tell me where you are right now, and if someone has ever told a story about you that you weren't in the room to correct, drop it below. This one's for all of us. Here is what the false claim states. Catherine made a scene at the hospital. Here is what the documented record shows. Layer 1. The obvious insult. The surface. I submitted a standard medical records request to St. Francis Memorial's Health Information Management Department. As a compliance auditor, I know the exact form, the exact routing, and the exact turnaround time. I requested the visitor log for the maternity ward on July 14th, and any nursing notes, incident reports, or security logs generated for that floor between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. The visitor log shows my arrival at 4:47 p.m. and my departure scan at 6:38 p.m. 1 hour and 51 minutes. The nursing notes for that shift, which I can read with professional fluency, contain routine entries, vitals, feeding assistance, one notation about a call light at 5:15 for additional blankets, no behavioral incident documented, no security contact logged, no disturbance code entered. The claim that nursing staff had to intervene is not supported by a single byte of data that the hospital generated that day. 0 entries, 0 documentation, in a system that documents everything, because I have spent my career ensuring that it does. There is nothing, because nothing happened. Layer 2. The hidden setup, the deliberate construction. I submitted a secondary request for any external communications received by the hospital regarding my visit. Patient advocacy offices maintain correspondence logs. I have audited hundreds of them. What I received was a letter, typed, formal, sent 4 days after Lily's birth, from Marcus Hale to St. Francis Memorial's Patient Advocacy Coordinator. The letter stated that a visitor, identified as my wife's mother, had caused emotional distress to a postpartum patient during recovery and requested that future visits be restricted or supervised. The letter was filed in the correspondence log. It was reviewed by the Patient Advocacy Coordinator, a woman named Janet Okonkwo, and her written response, which I also obtained, stated the following. After reviewing nursing documentation and floor logs for the date and time referenced in your correspondence, we were unable to identify any recorded event consistent with the concerns described. No further action will be taken at this time. Marcus sent a complaint letter constructing an event. The hospital's own records contradicted it. He built the evidence 4 days after the fact, deliberately, in writing, knowing it would exist as a document even if it was never acted upon, knowing that the existence of the letter itself, not its outcome, was what he needed. Because when you tell people, I had to write to the hospital about her behavior, they do not ask what the hospital said back. I stared at Janet Okonkwo's response letter for a very long time. I was sitting at my desk in the second bedroom I use as a home office, the overhead fluorescent humming at that 60 Hz frequency that I usually tune out, but that evening seemed to fill the room like tinnitus. My hands were flat on the desk surface, palms down, fingers spread. I did not move for what my computer's screen timeout told me was 11 minutes. The monitor dimmed, then went dark. I watched my own faint reflection appear in the black screen, a woman alone in a room, very still, understanding something. The calculations were running without my permission. I was mapping a timeline. I was seeing the architecture. I was counting backward from my sister's repetition of the hospital story, through 3 years of absence, through 2 years of declining invitations, through the letter in my hands, to the day Marcus walked me to an elevator and said something kind about parking validation while already composing, in his mind, the document that would rewrite that walk as a forced removal. Something inside my chest became cold and geometrically precise, like a blueprint being unrolled on a steel table. Layer 3. The older pattern. This was not the first time. I called Elena's college friend Bree Matheson. Bree and Elena had been close for 9 years. Roommates sophomore year, bridesmaids in each other's futures. The kind of friend who texts, thinking of you, on hard anniversaries without being reminded. Bree had vanished from Elena's life in 2021. No photographs together after March of that year. No tagged posts, no birthday messages. I called Bree on a Tuesday morning and identified myself. There was a long silence. Then she said, "I wondered when someone would call." Bree told me that in February 2021, Marcus sent an email to Bree's husband, Derek. The email expressed concern, warmly, thoughtfully, with the phrasing of a man who regretted having to say anything, about something Bree had allegedly said to Elena at a dinner party the previous month. The alleged comment was specific, hurtful, and completely fabricated. Derek confronted Bree. Bree denied it categorically, but the email existed. The specificity of the alleged comment made it feel documented, real, reported rather than invented. The friendship could not survive the doubt. Bree stopped calling. Elena, who had never been told about the email, assumed Bree had simply drifted away. The mechanism was identical to what had been done to me. An event occurred. Nothing problematic happened during it. Days or weeks later, a written communication was sent to a third party describing a fabricated version. The target was never informed. The target never knew the document existed, and the relationship dissolved in the gap between what happened and what was recorded. Layer 4. The deeper fraud, the thing underneath everything. I found the email to Elena's therapist. Elena had given me access to her email account 2 years prior. She had been locked out during a password reset, called me in frustration, and I walked her through recovery and saved the credentials in case it happened again. A detail Marcus did not know. In Elena's sent folder was a 4-paragraph email to Dr. Kessler, her therapist, dated September of last year. The email, written in first person as Elena, expressed deep concern about my mother's escalating emotional instability and boundary violations that are becoming increasingly difficult to manage. It requested that their upcoming sessions focus on establishing firm limits with a grieving parent who has not sought appropriate help. The language was clinical. The framing was measured. If I had not known my daughter's voice as intimately as I know charting irregularities, I might not have noticed that it did not sound like her. But it did not sound like her. And more importantly, the metadata told me it was not her. The email properties showed the author field as M. Hale. The device identifier corresponded to Marcus's laptop, not Elena's phone or desktop. The composition timestamp was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, a time when Elena's phone location data, which I verified through her Google account she had never removed me from, placed her asleep at home while Marcus was logged into her email from his office downstairs. He had impersonated his wife, in writing, to her own therapist, to preload the clinical relationship with a false framework so that if Elena ever questioned why her mother wasn't present, her therapist would confirm that this absence was healthy. This was not reactive behavior. This was infrastructure. Everything I had found, the hospital letter, Bree's destroyed friendship, the Sunday visits that became phone calls that became silence, all of it was architecture. Marcus was not a husband who overreacted once. He was a person who systematically constructed false documentation to isolate his wife from anyone whose presence might introduce a perspective he did not control. And he had used the most mundane tools available: emails, letters, concerned conversations, because mundane tools do not look like weapons, they look like care. The confrontation happened in Marcus and Elena's home, the house he had renovated himself over 18 months, the Brazilian cherry hardwood he had personally selected, the custom built-in bookshelves he showed every guest within 5 minutes of arrival, the imported ceramic tile in the entryway that he mentioned was hand-fired in Portugal. That house was Marcus's monument to his own taste, his competence, his domestic authority. He believed he controlled every room in it, every narrative that occurred inside its walls. I arrived on a Saturday afternoon in April for Lily's 3rd birthday party. Elena had invited me, tentatively, carefully, in the way she had learned to invite me, as though asking permission from the air around her. Marcus was in the kitchen arranging a cheese board with the deliberate geometry of someone who expected admiration. Elena's friend Rachel was there. Marcus's parents, Dawn and Patricia, my sister Diane, and Dr. Kessler, Elena's therapist, who Elena had invited because, as she told me on the phone, "She's been so helpful, Mom. I really want you to meet her. I think it would help." I brought a brown manila folder, unsealed, placed inside my handbag between my wallet and a birthday card for Lily, with $40 inside. Marcus greeted me at the door in a blue linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a dish towel over one shoulder. "Catherine, glad you could make it. We weren't sure you'd be comfortable with the drive." His voice was warm, solicitous, the voice of a man performing kindness in front of an audience. I said, "The drive was fine." I waited. I watched Lily open her gifts, a wooden puzzle set from Rachel, a stuffed elephant from Dawn and Patricia, a picture book from Diane. I ate a piece of cake. I drank a glass of water. I sat on the leather sectional Marcus had selected and watched him move through his house with the confidence of a man who had never been questioned in a room he furnished. And then, when the cake plates were cleared and Lily was playing with tissue paper on the floor, I reached into my handbag and placed the brown manila folder on the glass coffee table. "I'd like to correct something," I said. Marcus looked at the folder. His eyes moved from it to Elena to me. His expression shifted by perhaps 2 degrees. Not alarm, not yet, but the beginning of a calculation. "Catherine, this isn't the time. It's a party." The visitor log from St. Francis Memorial shows I arrived at 4:47 p.m. and departed at 6:38 p.m., I said. No incident report was filed. No nursing note references a disturbance. Marcus set his wine glass down on the side table with a careful click. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're making this about yourself. Again, on your granddaughter's birthday. This is exactly what I've been." I placed the second document on the table. Janet Okonkwo's response letter. The one stating his complaint did not correspond to any recorded event. "You went through hospital records?" His voice rose half a register. He looked at Dawn and Patricia. "Mom, Dad, you see what I mean? This is the behavior I've been talking about. She can't let anything go. She can't respect normal boundaries." "The email to Dr. Kessler," I said. I placed the printed email and its metadata sheet on the table. Sent from Elena's account. Author field, M. Hale. Device, your laptop. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m., September 14th. The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight. Elena stood up from the couch slowly. She picked up the metadata printout. She read it. Her face did something I will not describe because it belongs to her. "That's, you hacked her account. You invaded her privacy." Marcus's voice had lost its warmth entirely now. "Elena, your mother broke into your email. This is what I've been protecting you from. This is why I gave her my password," Elena said. She was still looking at the printout. 2 years ago, when I was locked out. She looked up. "Marcus, what is this?" "Elena, honey, your mother is not well. She has not been well since your father, Dr. Kessler." Elena's voice cut through his like a blade through paper. "Is this the email you received? The one you referenced when we talked about my mother in session?" Dr. Kessler had been standing near the dining room table, holding a cup of coffee in both hands. She set it down now on the table edge with a precise motion. She looked at the email. She looked at the metadata sheet. She was silent for approximately 10 seconds, and I counted, because I always count, before she spoke. "Elena," she said, "the email I received expressing concerns about your mother, if this metadata is accurate, and the extraction appears to follow standard forensic documentation protocols, then the communication I treated as originating from you was authored on a different device by a different user. I need to be transparent with you. The therapeutic framework we built in our early sessions was significantly informed by that email's content. I owe you a full conversation about what that means for the work we've done together, and I owe you an apology for not verifying the source independently." Marcus turned to his parents. His face had gone gray beneath the summer tan. "Mom, Dad, you know me. You've known me for 34 years. I would never..." Patricia looked at the coffee table, at the documents spread across its glass surface, at Elena's face, at mine. She pressed her lips together until they disappeared into a thin line. She did not speak. Don looked at his shoes. "You constructed a version of my mother," Elena said. Her voice was not loud. It was barely above a whisper. But every person in that room heard every word. "And you fed it to everyone in my life. My friends, my family, my therapist. You made her disappear, and you made everyone think it was her choice." Marcus made one final attempt. His shoulders dropped. His hands opened, palms up, the posture of surrender, of reasonableness. "Look, if I overreacted about the hospital, I'm sorry. I was stressed. I was a new father. Everything felt overwhelming, and I was trying to protect you the best way I knew how. Can we please talk about this privately? I'll apologize to Catherine. Whatever you need. I'll do whatever it takes." I said one sentence. Into the silence of that room with its Brazilian cherry hardwood and its hand-fired Portuguese tile and its custom built-ins that Marcus showed every guest who walked through the door. I said it without raising my voice, without moving from where I sat, without breaking eye contact. Marcus does not respond to what happens. He rewrites what happened, in writing, to people who were not there, and calls the rewrite protection. I did not say anything else. There was nothing else to say. The documents were on the table. The record was corrected. Elena picked up the folder. She lifted Lily from the floor, settled her on one hip. She walked into the master bedroom and closed the door. I heard the lock engage, a small mechanical sound, precise as a timestamp. Within 10 days, Elena had submitted formal requests for every communication Dr. Kessler had received regarding her case. 3 emails were identified as authored on Marcus's device. 2 referenced specific events, a Thanksgiving argument, a phone call confrontation, that hospital records, school event sign-in sheets, and my own documented text messages directly contradicted. The events Marcus described in those emails had not occurred. Within 3 weeks, Elena retained an attorney. The attorney subpoenaed Marcus's devices through an emergency motion citing evidence of coercive control. The forensic technology report, conducted by a firm I recommended from my professional network, identified 14 additional emails sent from Elena's account that she had never authored, emails to her employer requesting reduced hours, emails to college friends declining invitations, an email to a financial aid office regarding a parent loan consolidation that Elena did not know existed. Each one authored on Marcus's device, each one constructing a version of Elena's choices that Elena had never made. Within 6 weeks, Marcus's parents stopped returning his calls. Patricia sent Elena a card, handwritten, brief, on cream stationery, with no return address. It said, "I should have asked you directly. I repeated things I did not verify. I am sorry I didn't ask." Elena kept the card in her nightstand drawer. She has not responded. She may not. That is hers to decide in her own time. My sister Diane called me 3 days after the birthday party. It was early morning. Her voice was careful, measured, stripped of its usual briskness. "I repeated things without checking," she said. "For 3 years. I heard a version and I passed it on, and I never once called you to ask if it was true. I'm not going to explain why. I'm not going to make excuses. I just want you to know that I hear what I did." I thanked her. I did not tell her it was fine. It was not fine. She is my sister. She had my phone number every single day of those 3 years. She could have dialed it. She could have said, "Catherine, Marcus told me something. Is it true?" 1 question, 7 words. She did not ask them. We speak now, regularly, but differently, with more questions than either of us used to think necessary, with a kind of care that acknowledges fragility where there used to be assumption. Dr. Kessler provided a formal written statement to Elena's attorney, acknowledging that the therapeutic framework established in their early sessions had been compromised by communications she now believed were not authored by her client. She offered Elena 12 sessions at no charge and formally revised her clinical notes to reflect the corrected authorship. She also reported the incident to her licensing board's ethics committee voluntarily, a detail Elena told me about quietly, months later, with something like respect in her voice. Marcus contested the separation initially. His first attorney withdrew within 60 days after reviewing the forensic metadata evidence and the hospital documentation. He retained new counsel. The court proceedings lasted 4 months. The forensic technology report confirmed authorship patterns across all flagged communications with what the expert described as a high degree of certainty. The court granted Elena full residential custody of Lily, with Marcus receiving supervised visitation pending completion of a psychological evaluation and a parenting course focused on coercive control dynamics. The house, the monument with its imported tile and its custom shelving, is listed for sale as part of Equitable Asset Division. Marcus no longer lives in it. He is renting an apartment across town. I do not know the address. I do not need to. Rachel, Elena's friend who had been present at the birthday party, reached out to me 5 weeks later. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital where Lily was born. She stirred her latte for a long time without drinking it. Then she said, "I noticed, over the years, that everything I knew about you came through Marcus, never from Elena directly. Elena talked about missing you sometimes, and Marcus would change the subject or say something about boundaries being healthy. I felt uneasy. I didn't know what to do with the feeling." She asked if there was anything she could do now. I told her to keep showing up for Elena, consistently, without conditions, without needing explanations. She does. Elena and Lily live 11 minutes from my house now, in a 2-bedroom apartment with south-facing windows that fill with afternoon light. We have Sunday dinners again. Not every Sunday. Elena is rebuilding a life that was quietly disassembled around her, while she was told it was being protected, and some weeks the rebuilding requires solitude. I understand that without taking it personally. I have learned to hold space without filling it. Lily calls me Grandma Cat. She is 3.5 years old, and she draws pictures of cats that look like potatoes, and she does not know any of this happened. She will not need to know for a very long time, perhaps ever. That is Elena's decision to make, and I will respect it absolutely. I went back to full-time caseload at work after the legal proceedings concluded. I had reduced my hours 3 years ago, not because my health required it or my finances demanded it, but because the cumulative weight of being told I was difficult, unstable, overbearing, had begun to erode my professional confidence. I second-guessed chart reviews. I hesitated before flagging discrepancies. I wondered if I was seeing problems where none existed, in medical records and in my own family. Returning to full caseload was not triumphant. It was not a victory lap. It was a Tuesday morning in January. I sat at my desk. I opened a case file. I read a charting entry that contained a backdated addendum with mismatched paper stock. My hands were steady. My eyes moved across the page with the certainty of long practice. And I thought, this is what I do. This is what I have always done. No one took it from me. I simply set it down for a while, in a room where someone kept telling me my hands were shaking. I think about what it costs. Not in dollars, not in years, though those costs are real, to have someone else's version of you in active circulation. A false narrative is not gossip. Gossip is careless repetition. What Marcus built was architecture, deliberate, load-bearing, designed to support a structure that could not stand without it. A false record does not simply describe an untrue event. It constructs a world in which the lie is foundational. People arrange their behavior around it. They adjust their expectations of you. They stop calling. They stop inviting. They explain your absence using words someone else selected for you. And they believe they are being kind when they do so. And when the record is finally corrected, document by document, conversation by conversation, the world does not snap back into place. It has to be rebuilt, brick by brick, trust by trust, Sunday dinner by Sunday dinner. The correction is not a single satisfying moment. It is a process that takes longer than the lie took to install. I think about Diane repeating Marcus's story at her own kitchen table, to her husband probably, maybe to her children. I think about Rachel feeling uneasy for 2 years and not knowing what action to take with the feeling. I think about Dr. Kessler reading that email and beginning sessions with a framework she never verified with her own client. Every person in that chain had a moment, a single quiet moment, where they could have asked one question. They could have picked up the phone. They could have said, "Is this true?" They didn't. Not because they were cruel, not because they wanted me gone, because the version they were given was coherent. It was specific. It was delivered by someone who spoke calmly, who seemed concerned, who appeared to be managing a difficult situation with grace. Coherent stories do not invite scrutiny. That is what makes constructed narratives so dangerous. They are never wild. They are always reasonable. They always fit. They ask nothing of the listener except quiet agreement. Last Wednesday, I sat in my kitchen at 7:12 in the morning. The same kitchen, the same time, the same mug, the ceramic one with the chip on the rim, the small triangular absence where the glaze flaked away to reveal the raw clay beneath. I poured my coffee. I wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic. I pressed my thumb against that familiar chip, gently this time, not with the white-knuckle pressure of a woman holding herself still while her sister delivered someone else's lie, just resting there, feeling the small imperfection I had chosen to keep, because the mug still holds coffee, because I am not in the habit of discarding things simply because someone decided they were broken. The record is corrected now, not because I needed vindication, not because I required an audience to believe me, because my daughter deserved to know which version of her own life was real, and because a 3-year-old girl deserves to grow up knowing her grandmother's face, her grandmother's voice, her grandmother's steady presence at Sunday dinners, not as a story someone else tells about absence, as a living, documented, present truth. If you told someone else's story without them in the room, whose version did you tell? And when the full record finally came out, when the metadata was printed and the timestamps were checked and the architecture was laid bare, did you go back and correct the version you passed on? Or is it still out there somewhere, still circulating, still load-bearing, still holding up a world that someone else has to live inside without their consent? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable, and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.